All right, so this use case is really going to come down to kind of a combination of threat hunting and automatically responding to compromised credentials. So you'll see kind of as we go through here is there's this opportunity to kind of continue to mature as a security team, right? So, we're starting, with something that kind of hit us in the face last year, and now we're kind of moving the high volume work off of our plate, which allows us to see other things and respond. So, what you're seeing is kind of the maturity improvement of an organization as we go here. So we'll jump into the next slide here from a board perspective. So here's our bank mega, as Bryon likes to call them, and we'll keep going here. So we had the phishing use case, right? We talked about that. We got our awareness training in. That's great. People know what it looks like to see a phishing email. They started sending that in. That's a huge win from a security awareness perspective. But now we have all those phishing emails, which means we had to make an investment in automating and responding to those. So, the nice thing is when our customer did this, they went from having this huge backlog of security, unmanaged, unanalyzed phishing alerts to actually being able to analyze 100% of them. We're 100% automatic? No, but the amount of work that they had to do to close up the last few manually because there was something that was novel or unique inside of those allowed them to do that by hand. So now the amount of alerts that I've managed, 100%, huge risk reduction in the organization, but my mean time to response drops dramatically. We've seen folks go from 90 days down to minutes. And, again, that dwell time is how long is that, that exposure going to be inside of your environment? Obviously, if you're getting this many terribly effective phishing emails, you probably need to look at a secure mail gateway that's much more effective. But on top of that is, you also have customers that are dealing with other types of security alerts. So this is example come from a customer is, we had a customer that reported that they sent a fraudulent invoice to, one of their customers. And that basically was an attempt at a wire redirect to do wire transfer fraud. Thankfully, nothing was lost. The invoice wasn't paid because the customer saw it and thought it was awkward. But through the investigation, they realized, who sent the invoice. The email actually came from us. They look at it. It was from a user, and basically they have compromised credentials. So through that process, they realized that, hey, we should be watching for compromised credentials if we can, be proactive. It's a good best practice. So they implemented a credential monitoring service and they integrated with their automation solution. And obviously part of this exercise for them is, how the hell did we lose these credentials? So Bryon's going to jump into a use case about actually how do you wire a credential compromise monitoring service with an automation product, and actually how does that benefit by having them both working in concert with each other?
And this particular use case here for the flow, my job as an analyst here is actually pretty easy. So we've basically, Bank Mega worked with Recorded Future, and we leveraged their API and plugin that was built with Swimlane to essentially scan specific identities or domains that I wanted to monitor. So I enrolled bankmega.com, and then I'm basically pulling this Recorded Future service every 24 hours to look for any attempted credential dumps on any source over the internet that Recorded Future has basically connections with. So when that data comes in, though, I'm using Swimlane's workflow to kind of stack rank it for me, right? So I've kind of just set it up to give me essentially a low, medium, highs, and or criticals. And the way that I'm kind of tuning that in the workflow is I'm basically looking at, okay, based off of the user or the identity that was found, and in this case, it was Holden to Bank Mega, right? Are they an active employee, right? So that's point number one, right? I can query my ADP to understand, is this an active user or is it a former employee, right? It's not as big of a concern if they're no longer with the company. The second thing is, if it is an active user, what do they have access to, right? So again, I can use the APIs with my identity provider, with the plugins of Swimlane, to understand what do they have access to, right? Are they a system admin? Are they a VIP? Are they with HR? Are they with legal? Individual contributor? Like, where are they at in the organization, and what do they have access to, right? So that's kind of going to go towards that weighting aspect. And then, of course, during the investigation, like, are they valid credentials, right? So I can take the hashes that are being dumped from, these various sources, like a dark web or a collection list, et cetera, that's being provided, letting me know who exactly or where they got this dump from for these particular credentials. and understand, is it a valid hash, right? So does the hash match? And if so, I don't want to wait for me as an analyst to resolve this, right? There's no reason if we know it's a current employee, it's a credentials that are valid in the organization today, and whether they have full admin access or they're just a new employee that's still onboarding, I want to resolve this pretty easily, right? Because it's not going to be a major impact to that end user for most organizations. And so I can just automate a couple things. I can tie into Slack and just send an automated notification saying, heads up, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to be resetting your credentials, right? And it could be multiple notifications, Slack, email, however I want to get the notification out, but just kind of giving them that heads up that whatever you're working on, know that this is going to be happening in the next 30 to 60 minutes. And then, of course, at that time, I'm just going to trigger a password reset with the IDP for the user to redo the authentication and reset the password with their IDP. And that's it for this particular use case workflow, right? So not a lot of work from an analyst perspective, but quite a bit of value add for Bank Mega, because now if there are any type of compromised or credentials that are dumped out on the web, I can quickly remediate to getting those resolved. That way I don't have to worry about the possibility of somebody using valid credentials and doing lateral movements within my organization.
I'll kind of piggyback on this. Obviously, when you see credential compromise, a lot of times we'll move notifications to SMS. Obviously, that's probably one of the few mechanisms that's not going to be kind of killed when you hopefully have single sign-on implemented inside of your environment. So as folks lose access, at least they'll get a notification through an SMS provider. But what we see typically with the customers that are doing this type of monitoring is this is obviously really important for the credentials for their own, employees, but we're seeing this more and more being leveraged for monitoring third-party service providers. So, who has access to my environment? If it's my vendor portal or as a partner portal or whatever it might be, they're actually adding their suppliers and their partners into this list from a monitoring perspective, so that they realize that even if it's not their credentials that have been compromised, but it's someone that is associated with their organization, that kind of second order risk that comes from having interconnected systems is super important. So that and again, this goes back to, I think the comment that Tony made is how many different portals do I have to have open every day in order to do my job? Can I keep the credential monitoring thing up and refreshing it all the time? And what is my dwell time for responding to that? Those are all, super important as far as, reducing the amount of time that an attacker has in an environment, because you can't monitor all that stuff in real time. Even if it is getting a real-time notification, it's still sitting in your email box or sitting in Slack or something like that. That automatic response makes a huge difference from a dwell time perspective inside of the environment. And again, this is an API that we're pulling on a regular basis, right? We could do this daily, we could do this hourly, we could do this every minute if we wanted to. The nice part here is, if you're working with the right partner from a credential monitoring and leak perspective, they're watching the Etherpads of the world, the Pastebins, folks that are posting on GitHub and all the other places that we're seeing credential dumps come through. Again, that's a really time-consuming activity. Between phishing and credential monitoring, credential dumps, you'll see an organization save an entire FTE or more worth of time just by automating these activities and not doing them by hand anymore.